Welcome to Ripped and Torn TV. For this first broadcast, it is a pleasure to introduce an artist, fanzine writer, poet and filmmaker, and now novelist, Mark J. Hi, Mark.
Right, Tony, how you doing?
I'm fine, thanks. Yeah, good. How's yourself?
Yeah, good,
Good
good.
stuff. Can you talk us about your novel, about what's this about? We're talking about the Nutniks of 1977. What it's
Yeah,
about,
well,
why you
it's
decided to write it now.
this is it. This is the book, The
That's it.
Movement of 1977. It's quite a big weighty tome, and it's taken a while to write, and it's got some images in it as well. Um, but I wouldn't say it's an illustrated book, but it's kind of little bits of imagery in there. Um, Essentially, it's a riot of punk, myth, and memory. It's part novel, part memoir, and part cinematic roller coaster. It's
Uh-huh.
like the shards of sad beat poetry. It collides Camden 77, Hable Street ghosts from the 1930s, Grunwick strikes, whispers of continental radicalism, and the Sex Pistols anti-Jubilee boat party with
Well,
2017, where Herbert Gluck, the narrator, returns to his childhood home, haunted by his unfinished punk diary. It's told through a chorus of 16-year-old zine makers, failed lovers, failed revolutionaries, and escapees from Brummerland, Brummer meaning religious, Jewish religious orthodoxy. The story fractures into a collective kvetch as the present unfolds into an elegiac, noir-tinged hush. I've been told that by turns it's hilarious, political, and quietly devastating.
well, I think
My
what's
debut,
interesting about it is you has this conflict between punk and Jewishness, which is very good. It's like an outsider view of this Jewish faith and how you're coping with that and growing up with punk, which is a very
yeah,
unique viewpoint, I think.
thank you. Yeah. I mean, yeah, that is really it is quite unique, I suppose. I think the thing is, I was, I was living in a very orthodox household, and I went to a very orthodox Jewish school, and I think that the religion of Judaism was a kind of millstone around my neck because it had been sprung on me. I mean,
Mhm.
before I was about age 12, just before my bar mitzvah, I hadn't seen the inside of a synagogue. I was not aware of Judaism. I lived with my mum on a council estate, and she was a single mum bringing me up, doing 2 or 3 jobs. And she wasn't religious either, but she met this bloke who was very orthodox, and she, by turn, converted. And by turn, I was the sort of yardstick by which his newfound religiosity had to be measured. So, as I said, it was a millstone around my neck. I was get sent to this very, very religious school in Camden. And it was also, what else was happening was that Zionism was a sort of sword of Damocles that was hanging over my head at the same time. So I had this thing dragging me down, the religion, and then I had this threat of Zionism hanging over my head because
A
this school
threat.
was
You call it a threat, but it was meant to be a blessing.
well, it wasn't a blessing. It was a threat because it was like you either buy into it or you're not a full paid up member.
Hmm.
Yeah,
No half measures.
no half measures under the mug and David. Now, I'm not going to get like, everybody's entitled to their views and their beliefs, but I'm an anti-Zionist Jew. Zionism is a very new way of thinking. It's a new political movement. So Judaism has been going on for millennia, and there's so many things that I love about it, and I've found in it since I kind of rejected it. But I think what I'll just briefly say is that punk, for many of us, I mean yourself included, provided a portal into another world where we could be someone different, where we could reinvent ourselves.
Mm.
Um,
But what I
um,
think is interesting here, because you're talking it's about yourself, your personal experience, but actually the book is novelized about Herbert Gluck. So how much of it is a novel and how much of it is autobiography, and why you decide to make it into a novel style writing?
well, it's basically a novel, and that's a good question, Tony. when I did this book here called 5 Years Between the Gutters and the Galaxies, which is a flip over poetry book that I published last year.
Mm-hmm.
This is all kind of like my own story as Mark J. or Mark Blossberg. I was called then. I changed my name. I was also called Mark Scum. I was also called Rick Badger for some weird reason. All of that real story of myself is chronicled in this poetry. But when it came to writing the Nudniks, what I'll say is that everything in it is true, and it's based on real events and real things and real people that happened to me. Some of the names have been changed to protect the innocent and the guilty, mainly people in my religious community. So really, that's the way it is. And the only thing I have changed is that the guy who I'm calling the protagonist, Herbert Gluck, when you start writing prose with I as the beginning of every sentence, and you kind of get into this thing where you think, does it have to be authentic? I don't want to do a memoir here for various reasons. But when you start using the word I, you're starting to create a sort of a fictitious world of truth and untruth. And I'm very clearly pointing out all the way through the book and the comic, which we'll maybe talk about
We'll talk about that, yeah.
Yeah. That the parallels between the life that I lived as Mark Scum, producing this fanzine Scum, are all there in Nudniks, but the signpost to show that I've flipped it in a little way for various artistic and creative and literary reasons is I've turned Scum issue 1 into Nudnik issue 1. So I've actually taken the banner head of it, cut it up and changed it around. Here it is, right? So there it is, Nudnik. So anyone who's familiar, and I'm sure some of your viewers will be, with Scum, will realise that that's what I've done. And these Nudniks, Nudnik means kvetcher, complainer, moaner, a pain in the arse, somebody who doesn't take it lying down. So for me, that's like a proper punk. And the Nudnik is a group of my friends. All of them are based on real people that I knew at the time in 76, 77, who put this zine together.
Well, I think that actually brings me to a part of the book I was going to ask you about. And it's very well written. I have to say, it's very well written. And the section about the Sex Pistols boat trip takes you right into the action. You feel like you're right in amongst what's happening. I'm just wondering, it's so well written, so much action happening. How much of that was real, and how much of that is fictionalized for sensation or
well,
readability?
if you go onto YouTube, which everybody will do, obviously this is going to be on YouTube. You can see a movie that was shot at the time by Julian Temple. I don't know what it's called. It's not titled various things, but it's all about the 1977 Sex Pistols Jubilee boat party. And there I am, right in the middle of the upper deck, bending the ear of Johnny Rotten, giving him a bit of a fucking hard time because loads of my mates couldn't get on, and I'm grilling him about it, right? So you can see me there interviewing.
Yeah, I do, because they take their clothes serious. They treat it as a uniform, and it shouldn't be.
Interviewing him quite aggressively, really, I suppose, saying, why can't our mates get on? I thought punk was supposed to be for everybody. And he sort of like seeds through his teeth at me and says, it is for everybody. And then he gives me the classic first time, ever get the feeling. Now, you know that phrase, ever get the feeling, right? Where did that pop up really famously, ever get the feeling?
Yeah.
Yeah?
It's San Francisco, wasn't it?
San Francisco. What did he say? Ever get the feeling you've been
cheated, isn't it?
Cheated. Right. Okay. Well, I got the first ever get the feeling, and it was ever get the feeling you've been trapped. Okay. And for me, that had a great resonance coming from the background that I came from.
Yeah. And how old were you at this time?
I just turned 15, Tony. Just turned 15. Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. So, well, the thing about that is it's all there visually. The whole thing has been filmed by Julian Temple. The whole business. I'm standing at inches away from the band because there was no stage. It was just downstairs on this little pleasure barge thing, and I'm standing right next to Tracy O'Keefe, who was a very good friend of mine at that time, and in between her and Nancy Spungen and Jordan is two people along, and right in the thick of it, and then the searchlights come on and the music cuts and the boat gets stormed by cops and everybody had to leave really quickly. People got pulled off. I saw Tracy being bundled into a van and I shouted stupidly, "Oi, leave her alone." And that earned me a bundle into a van. I got my head bumped on the door going in. And I ended up at Bow Street Nick. It was the magistrate court, but it's also a Nick. And we spent the night in there with myself, a few of the people who were arrested, Malcolm, a few other assorted journalists, older people. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, that's all that's in the book there, so let's not spoil it.
But Tony, what I wanted to do, if it's all right, I think it will help really, is to read this short poem, which is about it, right? And it really gives you the sense of it. And you said, the book does it as well, but I'd like to just do this if that's okay.
Go ahead.
Thank you. And I'll tell you what the music is. It's been composed by a really old mate of mine called Kevin Mooney. We were Kings Road anarchist punks in 76, 77. We were big Ants fans, and then he goes and joins Adam and Ants when they become a pop group, and he's a great guy. And he has been introduced to me through another mutual friend of mine called Richard Carber, and you know him obviously really well, and he's a great writer as well. And, and he's basically put us in touch, and we've been working on this little project, which is like an art project really, about sound, images, words. It will become a band. We're hoping to do a recording and put out a cassette. And
Boat jerks forward. A floating circus towards Tower Bridge. Porthole glass my oracle. Zeke still waving. Camera like a manure arm sticking out of the scummy Thames. One arm clawing the muck. Waving, but not drowning. The last mensch in Babylon. I peel myself off the glass, climb the rusted steps, and boom, there he is, rotten, pale as candle wax, eyes darting like knives in a meat market, 4-pack of harp dangling, chewing, always chewing, while the hacks swarm around him, vultures in flares. Flash, click, whir. Why'd you hate the Queen, Johnny? Flash, click, flash. Why'd you spit on your fans, Sid? They bark and drool, sniffing out fresh carrion for tomorrow's headlines. And Rotten turns, fixes me. A skinny, trembling nudnik, 14 years old among the satin paparazzi. Heart hammering like a busted Blaupunk speaker. Ever get the feeling you've been trapped? He fires it like prophecy. A line etched in ash. A curse. A cone. Nearly every day I croak. And even I'm shocked at the truth spilling out. Raw as schmaltz. Hard as pavement. Rotten stares through me, like Moses checking for cracks in the tablets. Then he turns, snarling at the hacks again. This is obscene, all of it, bullshit, elitism, condescending crap. I've had enough. And suddenly, for a beat, a breath, he's not just rotten. He's prophet, punk messiah, with his lager gospel, his disdain hymns, his scowl scripture. Then he's gone, barrels through the press like a plague wind, through forests of zoom lenses, through the hair, through the din, leaving me marooned in his wake, burnt by his words, alone Schmendrick on the deck of Babylon, still trapped, still waiting, still waving, not drowning, carrying a gospel I didn't ask for, but can't shake.
We're moving into our multicultural phase here.
Yes.
Is the book is not just a novel, but as you showed us earlier, the graphic novel, the Tales of the Nudniks.
Yeah.
What made you do a graphic novel and a novel, and why did you decide to do them both at the same time?
Well, for me, Tony, it's all about supporting new talent and young people coming up, because I think punk's legacy is not just about looking back and all of us sort of wallowing in how it was then. You've got to look at what's happening now and what people are doing now. So I've been following a couple of really great artists on Instagram recently. A young woman called Sky Bow, who's about 20, and a chap called Russell Hardingham. And we've got together and created this comic based on like the first third of the book. And here it is.
Do you want to flick it open and show people like these beautiful drawings?
Yeah. So it's got this is Russell's style, which is very sort of film noir-y, which really appeals to my own cinematic sensibilities. And it's about me as a narrator, or let's say Herbert as a narrator, going back to his childhood home as an Airbnb, which is what I did, and sort of reconnecting with those ghosts from the past. Now, this is Sky's stuff, which is all set in 76, 77. It starts with Disco's Dead, and they're all milling about outside this club they get thrown out of. And then that's how they become the Nudniks. And these are beautiful drawings that she does in pen and watercolor. And Russell's are all done in Photoshop, his black and white stuff. So it's got the two timescales. And then here, I've got my old Scum artwork, which I've never published or printed before, is basically, I've colorized it all now. And then here we've got my old Nudniks diary, which is Mr. Men. It's a Mr. Men diary, which I've scrawled all over and basically rejigged to include all my characters from the book, right? So that's basically
it's fantastic stuff.
And thank you. And I think the reason why I wanted to do the comic was because I've always loved comics. I've always been interested. I started out as a cartoonist, and my work now that I did for the Pistols, the Story So Far poster and all the stuff I did for Vivienne, I did T-shirts with her and stuff. They're all being shown internationally in galleries all around the world, and I'm really, really sort of honoured about that and excited that stuff that I did as a 15-year-old kid is been shown on walls alongside Jamie Reed's work and stuff like that. I never ever expected that would happen, but it has done, and I'm very excited about that. So cartooning was always something that really interested me, I suppose it worked into filmmaking, which is when you start doing storyboards, you start to visualize a film with saying sort of blocked out cartoons, right? But with this book, Nudniks, I wanted to do something that's very immediately accessible, because this is like a bit of a bleeding hefty book, right? And you've got to commit to it. I mean, it's a great read and you can really get into it, but I'm not saying everybody is going to want to read that immediately. So if you bought that with that, Tales from the Nudniks, you'd get a sense of it visually. You'd also get a sense of all the humour and the characters, particularly the kids in it, who are all the Nudniks gang. And you see what they're like and how they behave. And Sky, and particularly Sky in the 76, 77 stuff, she's really caught the characters' faces just with a few lines, and it's beautiful. She's such a great artist. And so really what it is it's about giving a platform to these new people coming up, because I've always respected that when people did that with me, like Vivienne, Malcolm. So I just thought, well, let's do that,
That's good.
Yeah.
So you talked about filming there, because that's another branch of your talents, is your film work. And on your website, which I'll put a link to, there's a massive amount of film. I didn't realize you'd made so many films. So I think we'll just talk about a couple of them, but because you've got your punk one, One Day You'll Wake Up, which I think is really great. And again, it's a link to it on your website. It's a clip on your website. There's also your Jewish trilogy, which you write very well about. You explain your films on your website. Yeah. And this Jewish, we say that's kind of taken over. That's kind of your current project, I think.
Yeah. Well, this trilogy is I mean, I've been showing it quite recently in the last couple of years. It's called the Jewish Outsider Trilogy. It's basically films that I made in the 90s when I was, I suppose, revisiting and exploring my own Jewish identity from the point of view of an outsider, being a punk, being somebody who wasn't really in the whole kind of synagogue, board of deputies, Zionist vibe, which I'm sorry does actually define a lot of Anglo Jewry. And so a lot of my mates were outsiders in different ways. For example, like Jewish Item 1996, it's described as radical, raw and resonant, a hybrid filmic midrash centering queer, black, brown, immigrant, working class and women's voices speaking from the periphery of the periphery, identity as resistance, refusal and reinvention. Well, that was 1996, but if that ain't punk rock, I don't know what is.
Yeah.
You know? So I think that strand has always run through my movies, whether they're documentaries or whether they're fictions, you know. And the big one that for me that really defined and tried to sort of draw links between what really anarchism meant, what it meant, going right back to, you know, the roots of anarchism in Russia, but also then tracing it into the East End of London in the 1930s, was a film I made called East Endings. And it was a group of writers and artists. I made it in 1993. And they were sitting around in a restaurant called Bloom's in Whitechapel, which is now sadly gone. It's now Burger King. Do you know the place?
I don't know it, but I can imagine it.
It was a place where we all used to go for like Sunday lunches every now and again when we had a bit of dosh, you know, a few shekels, because it was a big place and it was quite a lot of stuff on offer. But it was a lovely, bustly, old style East End Jewish diner, and it sadly closed quite soon after I made this film. But I got this group of people together who were all in their 80s in 1993, and they'd all been active in politics in the 30s. They'd all been Bundist, anarchists, socialists. You know, they'd all been in different factions of the left, and most of them had been present at the huge political meeting of minds from all over the UK, not just the Jewish community, but the Welsh miners, or, you know, the Irish dockers, who faced off Mosley's fascists in 1936, the black shirts, when they tried to march through the East End and smash up people's homes and buildings and businesses. And they were completely outnumbered. And it basically kind of destroyed the whole curve of fascism that was happening at that time. And if you think about it, you know, Franco was at the gates of Madrid, and what was happening in Germany with the Nazi Party coming up in 1936. So we managed to see off these people, and it was a really big victory for the working classes at that time in the East End. And my family were all from there, were from Whitechapel and Stepney, so they were all part of that as well. So we made this film, East Endings, and these people explained to me what anarchy meant, and it wasn't destroying things, it wasn't blowing things up. You know, it might have been interpreted like that by some people, but it was about looking after your neighbours, looking after your friends, looking after your family, caring for people, giving out. And I've written about this in Nudniks because one of the characters, my granddad, Grampy, is based on Harry Blacker, who's the main character in East Endings. And he told me about doing food runs on after Shabbat with the bagels that were left over, that were not quite stale, but they were on the way, but they were still very edible, from a shop in the East End. And he'd take them around to all the unemployed people in the 1930s and give them out to them and distribute, you know. And with that, they'd also get a little bit of Trotsky with their bagel. You know, they get a little bit of midrash or something like that. And he told me about that, and he said that was anarchy. You know, that was anarchy, and it was called tzedakah.
So I think it's great. So these are stories in the film. Are these in the film?
Yeah. These stories are in the film. And I've translated they're in Nudniks. I've actually translated a lot of them to the character. And there's a bit where Herbert goes back to the East End with his granddad, and he goes around the council estates with all the Asian women who are out on strike at the Grunwick factory, which was real. You know, that whole issue in '77. And loads of them were out on strike, and they didn't have any strike pay. The unions weren't looking after them, and he was out there giving them, taking food round and you know, helping them out, and that was part of that whole community thing. Generations looked after generations. It didn't matter what religion you were, what culture you were from, where you landed from in the world. You were all in the same mishegas, really,
Yeah.
and you looked out for each other.
So
So
sounds great stuff. Thinking about all this stuff, you know, you're obviously very excited. It's coming through. You're very excitable, and there's a lot of energy in you. It's like a part of the
I like
punk thing. Um, it's sort of like as you're saying at the beginning, how punk sparks you off and it keeps you going. And I was going to say, does punk and music still excite you now to that extent?
well, you know, there's a famous quote, isn't there, that says all art should aspire to the condition of music. And I think that's true in a sense, in that music, I mean, punk really, we're talking about a particular movement right bang in the middle of a timeline, right? But if you look at music, where that comes from generally, and you look at, say, Afro-American blues music, you know, and that formed rock and roll, and that went into that whole thing. You look at, say, for example, I just think randomly, like Steve Jones, right, from the Sex Pistols. His guitar playing is very influenced by Johnny Thunders. If you then drill down into where Johnny Thunders is going, it's into the doo-wop groups and the blues and the early rock and roll groups of the 1950s, right? And then that all goes back to slavery. It goes back to the days of forced migration, you know, and where that music came from, what it was. It was a howl of pain and of suffering, but also an expression of joy, you know. And so music really, it doesn't have these sort of boundaries. Like, yes, you know, punk is punk. And of course it had that moment. And I think punk is a very, very significant moment for me. But I'm now like listening to, you know, all kinds of different music, you know. And the good thing about punk also, I have to say, as you probably know, it turned us on to all kinds of other areas of music, didn't it?
I think we should really sort of wrap this up now. Let's see if I can get this gallery mode on. Okay, I mean, that should be on together. So thanks, Mark, for your time. It's been fascinating. And where can we get the books from?
Yeah, well, you can go onto my website, and that's where you can blag them, and it's very easy. It's Mark J, one word, lowercase, .tv.
Yeah,
And then if you click on Scum Publications, which is a great big red sort of banner there, that will take you through to a page where you've got all the books, and you can buy
yeah.
them off eBay at the
I think it's a
moment.
fascinating website. We'll put a link up to it. But it is a fascinating, not just for the books. There's a lot of explanations of things, a lot of like from yourself. Obviously,
Yeah,
the writer and you is pouring out there, the fanzine writer.
it's lovely to have this chat with you, Tony, because you know I just want to big you up and say how much Ripped and Torn was it's such an influence on me doing Scum, right? You know, it really was. I mean, everybody talks about Sniffing Glue, but Sniffing Glue, I'm sorry to say, I mean, it was quite boring in some ways, the
Yeah.
format. I really did find it a little bit of a drag, you know, and also I love Ripped and Torn, and I really think it was a big, iconoclastic, influential zine, and all love to you, mate. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Mark. Take care.
You're welcome, mate.
Bye.
Cheers.